Today marks the one-year anniversary of the killing of Trayvon Martin. It happened in Sanford, Florida. He was gunned down by George Zimmerman. Zimmerman set to stand trial on June 10th of this year in a case that brought to light actually the stand your ground laws. It brought to light the NRA and their activity with ALEC and ALEC's activity in enacting these laws. It was an amazing period of time in sort of criminal justice history, because a lot of our attention went on to these laws, how they are unfair, and as we heard earlier, how none of these stand your ground laws, no state has adopted them since Trayvon Martin was killed. So that is actually an encouraging piece of news. What is discouraging, though, is that the parents of Trayvon Martin have to wake up every day without their son. Both of the parents spoke to MSNBC today. Here's Sabrina Fulton first.
Initially, our focus was to get an arrest, and that's why they had so many rallies. My family is holding up fairly well. We're leaning on each other. We're leaning on the rest of the family and also friends. I don't know if we're ready emotionally. I think we're just going to take one day at a time and just, thank God for each day.
Tracy Martin is Trayvon Martin's father. He also spoke to MSNBC.
We don't expect Trayvon to be the top story every day in the media, but he's definitely the top story in our life. It's not just urban gun violence. I think it's violence in general, senseless gun violence in general, the Newtown massacre, all the violence that's going on in Chicago, the violence that's just going on across the country is senseless. And lawmakers need to take a real good look at these gun laws and the people that they are giving gun license to.
When we began discussing this story and giving it, I think, excellent coverage, it was a story that Cenk wanted to cover all the way. And one of the people that was brought on almost daily at the very beginning was Brown University professor Tricia Rose, big part of the Young Turks family. Tricia joins us again tonight here on the Young Turks. So, Tricia, it's hard to believe that it's been a year since that killing. But I want to ask you this. Did this begin a year that will be pivotal in the way we look at gun laws? I mean, this was a gun case. It was also a race case. But I would say that 2012, finishing with Newtown, was a lot about guns, and it began with Trayvon Martin.
Well, it is astonishing that it's a year. I'm just really taken aback by that, because it hasn't really left my consciousness, and so I just assumed less time had gone by. But, it's no question it's a gun case, and it's also a race case. And I think that Trayvon Martin's parents, bless them for their ability to keep this in the public eye with dignity and with openness and with human connectedness. They're focusing on the gun phenomenon, which is that we have a society obsessed with guns and a lot of gun culture and a lot of violent pop culture. But I really think the race element, we have to figure out how to be anti-racist without appearing to be racially polarizing. That is to say, we need to collectively cross race, be anti-racist, and recognize that these laws, the criminalization of young black men, the many Trayvon Martins who are either languishing unjustly criminalized or dead in the street from a variety of reasons, is a bigger systemic process that has to be dealt with. And we can't do it unless we attend to race, at least in part.
Yeah, and Tricia, I think another component of what you were just saying is the idea that, these stand your ground laws, they are racist, as we know, at the very start, because it sort of justifies you saying that I don't like that person because of what they look like. And that's what we're saying that George Zimmerman did. That's what the prosecution is going to say that George Zimmerman did. So it is a racial discussion in that way. And I can't help, we've been talking a lot about the anniversaries of so many of the civil rights victories of the 1960s, but so many of the tragedies as well. 50 years since Medgar Evers was killed, 50 years since the church bombing in Birmingham, and the riots in Birmingham, and the protests and all of that. I think that it's important, though, that on this one-year anniversary, we look at this as a race case. How, without being insensitive to the gun side of it, can this be discussed as a race case?
Well, actually, let me focus in on a piece of what you said. When you said that the stand your ground laws hinge on perception. They hinge on what you think you're seeing and feeling threatened. So in order to understand that as a race problem and an anti-black sort of context, you have to understand how racialized perception functions unconsciously, consciously, intentionally, unintentionally, and the way the manipulation of the laws to support that very fact. So you have to acknowledge that, and you have to study it, and you have to pay attention to it in order to say, actually, perception is not race neutral. And as a result, the association of blacks with criminality, the same actions done by a black person looks criminal when it's done by a white looks innocent, means that race neutral laws in language, right, stand your ground, anybody can stand their ground, is in fact not a racially neutral law in effect. And that's what we have to confront. That's an anti-racist project.
Yeah, and the idea of standing your own ground in your neighborhood, it's an evil way of defining it. I mean, even in New York City, there was an interesting article in the New York Times about how the Chinese population is moving uptown to East Harlem. And right now there are killings of Chinese people in East Harlem because they're defending their neighborhood, is what it's being said, is that the killings of the Chinese are... So this whole idea of philosophy of stand your ground. But there was a bit of encouraging news on stand your ground, and I said it at the top of the segment. Let's listen to Benjamin Crump. He is the lawyer for the Martin family. Let's listen to what he had to say about Stand Your Ground.
The Stand Your Ground law, nobody talked about it this time last year until Trayvon was killed. And we have to really think about how Trayvon has changed the conversation. Everybody in America knows about this controversial law. And now, for the first time in 5 years, there were no new states that enacted Stand Your Ground laws. So we look at that as a plus.
You know, I mean, Tricia, Trayvon Martin didn't want to be the martyr here, but in a way, he may have led to, and his killing may have led to the end of these laws, or is that just wishful thinking on my part?
Hey, listen, I know that there's no question that many, many millions of people have been able to stay focused on what they mean and their effects as a result of the galvanization of his death. So in that sense, it has not been in complete vain. And it is important to note that new laws not being passed in this way is at least stemming the tide. It may not mean that they'll go away, but at least there aren't new ones. But remember, as you pointed out, Medgar Evers, Emmett Till, Jordan Davis, also in Florida since Trayvon. You know, this is a big systemic pattern. I think the best thing we can do for Trayvon and his family is to connect him to a systemic process and a legacy, and end the legacy, not just the laws, but the whole ideology that seems to find new shapes over and over. But we can do that. No question we can.
She is our favorite professor, Tricia Rose, coming to us from Brown University, from Rhode Island. Thank you so much, Tricia, for being on the show. It was great to see you again as well. But, you know, with the Stand Your Ground case, the gun ideal in America, the fact that we are so gun crazy in America has really had an exclamation put on it in Texas. We're going to look at a story from Houston.
They're easy to use, easy to learn how to use. They're not very expensive, and they're just all around great home defense weapons.